The failure of the 1857 expedition made many skeptical of the ambitious project. Western Union's plan now appeared better than ever, as they continued to string their cable through Alaska. However, Cyrus Field remained optimistic.
Although this unfortunate accident will postpone the completion of this undertaking for a short time, the result has been to convince all that took part in this experiment that with some slight alteration in the paying out machinery, there appears to be no great difficulty in laying down the cable. Cyrus Field, 1857.
Field again raised more capital to launch a second attempt. The company ordered 700 miles of new wire to replace the lost cable. Engineers and scientists were hired to review every detail of the cable-laying procedure. They made many revisions to equipment on board and devised a new payout method, which included anti-lock brakes.
It was decided for the expedition in 1858 that instead of starting with one ship laying a cable in Ireland and then another ship picking up where that one left off in mid-ocean, they decided this time that the two ships would meet mid-ocean, splice the cable together. One would head for Ireland and another one would head for Newfoundland. That way it'd take half the time to lay the cable, and time was of the essence given weather conditions and all.
On June 10, 1858, both ships, fully loaded, and their convoy departed England for the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. There, under Cyrus Field's watchful eye, engineers spliced together the two cables, and the ships parted ways. Connected by the wire, they were able to communicate back and forth via telegraph. But before the two ships even lost sight of each other, just 3 miles apart, the cable broke. Both ships returned, respliced, and once again parted ways.
3 or 4 times they do this, and the last time they've actually gotten a fair distance and it breaks, and they've agreed that if they get more than maybe 200 miles of cable and paid out, then they wouldn't have any left over to complete the enterprise, and then they just take off for home. Well, it's very close to that amount. In fact, they've reached that limit.
The ships headed back to Ireland to restock in hopes that Field could convince the board of directors for a 4th try. Several board members resigned in disgust, but once again, Field's persistence prevailed.
Field, always the optimist, says, let's go again. A calculation is made about how much cable is left on board, and lo and behold, there is just enough to get across the Atlantic.
July 29, 1858, the two ships were back in the middle of the Atlantic splicing cable again for the 4th time. They were about to achieve both success and failure in the highest degree. Amazingly, within just 2 weeks' time, both ships, having successfully laid over 1,000 miles of cable each, finally reached the coasts of Newfoundland and Ireland.
Now, for the first time in history, North America and Europe were linked, and Britain had instant communication with the colonies she had lost 75 years earlier. This was an epic moment in history, and the world knew it.
Overnight, from being a crowd of lunatics, they became heroes. Field was called Field the Great. The Queen, Victoria, knighted 2 of the British contingent, and there was great rejoicing in the streets of New York. Fireworks, much eating, much drinking.
They had parades up Fifth Avenue. Sunday, there were pronouncements from pulpits in New York and Boston and Syracuse. This was bonding the two English-speaking worlds together. It was bonding the Christian nations together, and the cables were seen as spreading word about our economic systems, our Christian heritage.
The celebrations were comparable to the ending of a war. On August 16, 1858, Queen Victoria sent a congratulatory 96-word message to President Buchanan that prompted even more celebrations. The amount of fireworks filling the skies caused New York City Hall's tower to burn down, almost taking the entire building with it. But what the public didn't know was that there were already problems with the new cable. Serious problems.
The public went wild. This kind of concerned Field because he knew the cable wasn't perfect. They were having problems. Messages were coming across garbled. Although they were coming across, it would take an hour to get a word across. Meanwhile, all this pandemonium's breaking out, and Field, I think, became more and more concerned about the health of the cable. And ultimately, during the peak of celebrations, the cable stopped working.
1 day short of a month, the line went dead. Public reaction quickly turned. Field was considered by many a master crook. There were some who doubted that the cable had been laid at all. One newspaper reporter proved that it hadn't. Now, Western Union's plan seemed confirmed as the correct one.
The cable of 1858 failed in part because the electrical engineer of the project was of the opinion that the bigger the voltage, the better. Ran a current of 2,000 volts through the line, and as a result, he basically fried the cable.
Just what went wrong is a matter of conjecture. Most likely it was a 2,000 volt current that the engineer sent pulsing through the line. But several other reasons for the failure have been suggested also.
All of them related to quality control, to an understanding of electricity, to an understanding of the manufacturing process. But whatever the reason may be, it certainly failed.
For Cyrus Field, organizing another attempt wouldn't be as easy as before. The United States was on the verge of a civil war, resulting in more pressing issues for potential investors and governments to worry about. It would be 8 long years before America and Europe would speak to each other again across the bed of an ocean. After the failure of the cable, Field was vilified by the public. Many believed he was a charlatan. Acquaintances crossed the street to avoid him.